Good morning from WKYT News. I'm Bill Bryant. We hope you're enjoying your weekend and we welcome you to Kentucky Newsmakers. We're now in the last month of what has been a wild election year in America and, of course, here in Kentucky. In just a few minutes, we'll show you some of the back and forth between House Speaker Greg Stumbo and Governor Bevin's office as Republicans and Democrats battle for control of a narrowly divided state house. Tonight, the major party candidates for president, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, will have their second debate. You can see that live on WKYT this evening at 9 o'clock. Kentucky also has a U.S. Senate battle underway. Freshman Republican Senator Rand Paul is hoping to hold off a challenge from the Democratic nominee, Lexington Mayor Jim Gray. And there are other races around the state, including those House contests that could tip the balance of power in Frankfort. Joining us on Kentucky Newsmakers, Trey Watson, spokesman for the Kentucky Republican Party, and Krystal, a Democratic Party activist who once herself ran for Congress and who now lives in Louisville, and former host for MSNBC television. Thanks for coming. Appreciate it very much.
Pleasure.
Well, we know that we are likely to have a huge audience for this debate tonight. 84 million or so watched the last one. Do the American people learn much from these encounters? Do they make their decisions based on what they're likely to see in these debates?
I think to a certain extent. I mean, one thing that you see, of course, as we get closer to the election is there are fewer and fewer undecided voters. And I think people feel a lot that they know who these two candidates are. But in particular for Donald Trump, he had such a disastrous debate last time around. He really has to prove to people that he can be credible on a national stage, that he can stand up, that he can control himself, that he can appear presidential, that he has a command of the issues. And he just hasn't really demonstrated that yet. So I think for people who are on the fence, that'll be the big question mark. Everybody knows Hillary Clinton is prepared. They know she can hold her own in a debate. For Donald Trump, I think the stakes are much higher.
You know, I think the first debate really did not fit Donald Trump's style of politicking and really were to the advantage of Secretary Clinton, just a straight-up debate. You switch to a town hall meeting that's all about connecting with individual voters and being able to speak to individual voters' issues. That's really Donald Trump's bread and butter, being able to play to a crowd, play to people, and that's where Secretary Clinton really struggles, with being able to connect on a one-on-one human level with real Americans. That's what's really held her back as a politician this year and in the past, and what's kept this race close. And I think Donald Trump is going to perform much better in tonight's debate than he did in the first one, just because he's got that audience to play to. He's got a crowd to work, and I think Secretary Clinton's going to struggle when she's up on the same stage with him in this setting. Was the vice presidential debate consequential?
No, not really.
No. they never really are.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think it was interesting from a political perspective because Mike Pence came in wanting to win and wanting to sort of preserve his reputation for the future. And Tim Kaine clearly came in with the plan to attack Mike Pence, to try to get under his skin, to try to get something out of him and show that there's daylight between him and Donald Trump. He didn't ultimately really succeed in doing that, but he laid out that strategy. They did get some decent headlines about are Trump and Pence on the same page. Ultimately, though, especially with these two candidates and especially with such a lightning rod as Donald Trump, it's all about the top of the ticket. No one is voting for the vice presidential nominees here.
I think it was an interesting strategy on the part of Tim Kaine, which was talk about Mike Pence as little as possible. You know, there was several issues in Pence's past you would have thought would have been brought up, but they weren't. It was all about hammering Donald Trump.
There was nothing about gay rights, for example, which was kind of his, you know, the thing that he was most known for nationally is the religious freedom.
I do think, if anything, people who just said, people who would say, I don't really like either of these two presidential candidates, but I kind of like the two vice presidential candidates. I think that those folks may have been turned off a little bit by Senator Kaine's interrupting and aggressive style in the debate. You see a lot on Twitter, heard a lot of comments in the afterwards about his interrupting manner during the debate.
So the town hall setting is different because you are talking directly with individual voters, and it will be interesting to see how each performs in that setting.
Yeah, I think it's actually a great opportunity for Secretary Clinton in that way because, as Trey rightly points out, there's this perception of her that she doesn't relate well with ordinary Americans, that there's a kind of likability factor that's not there for her, an authenticity. So she has a real opportunity here to prove that wrong long and to exceed that bar that folks have for her. So I think in that way it could be really good for her. She also has a lot more practice at this kind of a format that Donald Trump. He was supposed to have sort of a test run last night, but it ended up being such a different format and with a friendly conservative host, and actually the audience didn't even ask the questions, the host did, and he came right out and said, you know, this wasn't a practice, this was just another campaign stop. So he doesn't really have a lot of experience in this regard, and even beyond the relating to the people, there's a lot of theatrics that go into the way you sit on the stool, when you get up, when you move around, that he just hasn't thought through and practiced before. So be interesting to see how he does in that format.
Well, but to your point, I think, you know, he's a showman. He's had a successful television show. His rallies are productions meant for television. So I do think that he's.
But that's what we heard before the first debate too, and that didn't work out so well
but
for him.
the debate,
it's a very different thing than a reality TV show.
You're right, but a town hall meeting is much closer to that than a straight up person-to-person debate behind a podium. I think Donald Trump's going to excel in this format.
Well, Donald Trump has made immigration a key part of his campaign. He promises to build a wall between the United States and Mexico. Hillary Clinton calls for what she calls comprehensive immigration reform. Is that a key issue in this race?
Absolutely it is now. And it's true that Donald Trump really put that front and center. And for his base, that issue is a lightning rod. Now, if you look at the broader public, and in particular some of the minority groups, Latinos, largest growing group demographic in America, this is an important issue, but in the other direction. So in that way, he's been really out of step with where the majority of Americans are. And actually, you see now Mike Pence and Donald Trump try to change some of their rhetoric about immigration, walking back their complete ban on Muslims, which had been, of course, a centerpiece of the primary campaign. So I think the other thing for voters is they have to look at this ticket and say, do we even really know where you stand? Because they were very clear up front about immigration, and now they've sort of steadily walked back their position and are trying to change and moderate to appeal to a broader audience. But who are you really? What are you really going to stand for when you get in there?
Well, I think the gist of this ticket has never changed. It's about a strong position on maintaining legal immigration and stopping illegal immigration. You know, I think, especially in the Latino community, you know, there was a Morning Joe segment last week where they were interviewing some folks out in Nevada because there were some surprising numbers that Donald Trump was pulling over 30% of Latinos in Nevada, and they were talking to him and they were saying, hey, you know, I've been here 3 generations. I'm trying to get a job. I'm trying to get my kids jobs. We've been here legally. We did it the right way. We don't think these people coming over here illegally should be able to be competing in the job market with us. We're more concerned about the economic issues than anything having to do with the immigration issues. We're just looking for jobs. And I think a lot of Hispanic families, especially those who have been here multiple generations, they're more concerned about the economy, about education, about the opportunity to make a life for themselves here in the United States.
There's been a lot of talk in this race about Donald Trump's taxes and tax returns and Hillary Clinton's emails. Is that the discussion that voters want to hear, or are they more interested in hearing about things like the economy?
Well, you know, I think it's both, because ultimately you want to vote for someone whose stances on the issues you agree with and who you feel like is going to be able to help the position of your family and also your community and your country. But you also want to know that you really believe in this person and you trust them and that they have a record that backs up their rhetoric on the trail. Now, Hillary Clinton, A, is one of the most qualified presidential candidates we've ever had, and B, is also one of the most scrutinized. I mean, we've read her emails, right? We've had hour after hour of congressional testimony and multiple investigations into what she did as Secretary of State and before. Donald Trump, we know virtually nothing about, and what we have learned has been very troubling. For example, the tax returns that were released that showed this massive billion-dollar loss, that showed he likely hasn't paid taxes for probably the last 20 years. His business dealings have been shady at times. You think about Trump University. You think about the fact that he's out there claiming to be a man of the people, and meanwhile in his own construction projects, he's buying steel from China when he could be buying it here in America. So, you know, I think it is important to look at who these candidates are now and who they've been, who they've demonstrated themselves to be over the course of their lifetime. Because campaign rhetoric is one thing, your actions and who you've been as a person contributing to this country is another matter.
Well, yeah, on the taxes, I don't think the tax returns matter that much. I think
Voters disagree with you.
Well, we all know who Donald Trump is. We know
No,
we know he's had business up and downs. Thank you, Tim Kaine. We know he's had business up and downs. But at the end of the day, here's the thing about taxes and why I don't believe it matters and why voters that I talk to don't think it matters is the American dream is we're all going to be rich one day, and that's why tax cuts are always popular, is because everybody believes they're going to be rich one day.
Isn't it important to know? I mean, I know that the Republican Party has made a big deal out of the connections between the Clinton Foundation and interests around the world. Isn't it important to know what financial interests Donald Trump has around the world before he ends up as commander-in-chief and in the Oval Office making decisions that affect our national security? Don't we as voters deserve to know what his, where his loyalties are really going to lie? Because right now we have no clue.
Well, I mean, I think he's been pretty upfront about his financial disclosures that you have to file when you run for office. I think Hillary Clinton, on the other hand, no business dealing that Donald Trump has ever had has resulted in the potential loss of American secrets. The email servers, if Hillary Clinton were to go in right now to try to get a government contract, she would not be able to get security clearance. Yet we're going to make her commander-in-chief. I think the email problem is much larger than anything on Donald Trump's taxes or business dealings, because it disqualifies her from top secret security clearance. And how can we put a person like that in the position of being commander-in-chief?
We're on Kentucky Newsmakers here on WKYT, and the presidential debate is tonight, 9 o'clock. We'll be having that for you live. Come back in a moment. We'll talk about Kentucky's U.S. Senate race and the battle for the Kentucky State House. WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers. We'll be right back. Welcome back. WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers continuing here, and we're talking this morning with a couple of guests about the big campaign we have going on in America and, of course, across Kentucky. Joined today by a spokesperson for the Kentucky Republican Party, that is Trey Watson, and you see him on your right. We'll show him there. That's fitting today, right? And on your left is a Democratic Party activist and strategist, Krystal Ball, who is with us here. We appreciate it very much. Before we leave the presidential race, let's talk real quickly on this, because this brings it to Kentucky, this coal issue. Donald Trump is promising that he would reopen mines and bring coal jobs back. Hillary Clinton says coal areas need to retool their economies for the future, and is promising some money to assist with that. How is that going to play out in Kentucky?
I think when you travel through East Kentucky, and I tell people that aren't from Kentucky all the time, because I spend a lot of time out east, it's not a recession, it's not a downturn, it is an economic depression going on in East Kentucky, and it's caused by the Obama administration, not just the regulations they put on coal, certainly the financial environment and the cost of low cost price of natural gas is hurting in the marketplace, but we could be exporting our coal to other countries that don't have natural gas. We could be making steel that requires met coal, which Donald Trump has said that he will bring back. Hillary Clinton wants to bring back steel, except she didn't want to bring back Appalachian coal, which we need that coal to make steel. So she's not serious about her steel plan either. But when you go out there, it is just devastated. It is devastated. Coal is a cheap, low-cost electricity that, even if we're not using it in the U.S., like I said, the developing world would love to have coal, because the life expectancy of a human being increases dramatically when you have consistent access to reliable electricity. And they can do that with coal relatively cheaply. There are worldwide global opportunities to sell Kentucky coal that the Obama administration, through blocking the building of new ports, through not granting permits, through other regulations, they're stopping it. They're actively preventing these people from working, from putting them back to work, and it has caused great economic hardship in the area.
Yeah, I mean, Trey is right that the economic devastation in East Kentucky is heartbreaking and is absolutely critical for both of these candidates to address. But the truth is that coal was in decline long before the Obama administration came along. So you have to be thinking about the future. And I know Donald Trump will go out there and say whatever people want to hear, and actually I find it infuriating, because the truth is that he's not going to be able to change the global marketplace, and he has no plan for how to move forward in East Kentucky and the rest of Appalachia. And really, all his words, all his rhetoric, I alone can fix it. He doesn't have a plan to fix any of these problems. He just tells people what they want to hear, and I actually find that really disgusting and one of the low points of his campaign.
All it takes is a new EPA chief. They can start issuing permits again and start mining coal again and putting these people back to work.
Well, let's talk about the Kentucky U.S. Senate race. It's between incumbent Republican Rand Paul and Democratic challenger Lexington Mayor Jim Gray. There are differences on several issues, of course, but Gray has criticized Paul as well for running for president during his term and doing debates around the country while trying to gain that nomination, but then declining invitations in Kentucky for debates. Still, is it an uphill battle for Gray to try to take that seat?
I think you have to say it is an uphill battle, but I also think he's really exceeding expectations and is running a great campaign and is a great fit for this state. I mean, here's a guy who's really committed himself through his business and through his life to the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And he says, you know, I can promise you I'm not running for president. He's here to stay. I think that resonates with folks. And I also think the fact that Rand Paul won't debate Jim Gray, won't be up front with Kentucky voters matters to people. They want to know his plans. They want to know that he's committed to this area, and he just hasn't demonstrated that with his actions.
Well, first of all, Rand Paul's holding town hall meetings almost daily across the state and has been for months. Second of all, I find the attack on Senator Paul for running for president while he was serving as Senate interesting, considering that I live here in the city of Lexington, and our mayor is off running around the state running for U.S. Senate. I think you know, that attack is interesting because he's doing the exact same thing he's attacking Rand Paul for. I think Rand is a great fit for the state. His conservative values are fantastic. He has proved to be a champion for the Constitution, for conservative causes in the Senate. His voting record, even while he was running for Senate, was unmatched in the U.S. Senate, and I think he's going to easily win a second term.
He hasn't done much of anything in the U.S. Senate except talk a lot. He brings a lot of attention to himself, but in terms of getting stuff done, there's not much there.
Well, I think anyone who's opposed to drone strikes, who's opposed to government surveillance, would disagree. I think he's really been at the forefront of bringing those issues to the public mindset.
To the battle now of the Kentucky State House. Democrats have run that chamber since 1921. It's the only legislative chamber in the South that Democrats still control. We've seen it get rough in recent days. The House Speaker Greg Stumbo forming a committee to investigate the governor here a few weeks before the election. Which side has the advantage in these House races?
I think the Republicans clearly have the momentum going forward.
I'm shocked he would say that.
Well, you know, the battlegrounds of this state are going to be the rural areas. And when you look at the election results in 2014 with Senator McConnell, you look at the election results last year with Governor Bevin and up and down the ballot with the down-ticket races, Republicans are clearly trending up, especially in East Kentucky. I think that we're in great shape to take the majority this year. I look forward to the final 30-something days here to wrap it up.
But, you know, we've heard this time and time again that this is going to be the year when Republicans in Kentucky take the House, and it hasn't happened. And, you know, I think that the wild unpopularity of this governor is a real problem because folks here aren't stupid. They don't want to hand him complete control of both legislatures so he can do whatever he wants. I've been speaking to folks who are out canvassing now, and of course Kentucky's famous for splitting their ticket, for voting Republican here and Democrat there. They really look at the candidates and evaluate each on an individual basis. And that's what you hear out there. I mean, Donald Trump is going to win in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. There's no doubt about that. I'm not fooling myself in that regard.
Are you concerned about coattails for him?
Of course, and that's why when you see the polling shifting the way it is now towards Hillary Clinton, that's a very positive sign for us.
No, it's not
but we
shifting
also,
here.
what I'm hearing on the ground is that you have a lot of folks who are saying, yeah, I'm going to go for Trump at the top of the ticket, but I like the Democrat I have here, or I like the Democratic challenger here. So I think Democrats have a great slate of candidates and a great chance to hold it.
Krystal's obviously hearing different numbers than I am. What I hear in Kentucky is Donald Trump's numbers are getting larger. I actually hear especially in the battleground districts, Matt Bevin's popularity is through the roof. I think people elected him to office for the same reason that Democrats are supporting Bernie Sanders and that Republicans and independents are supporting Donald Trump, is they want somebody to blow the system up. They think government's broken, it's not working for the people, and they didn't
elect someone to be vindictive and make massive cuts to education and attack workers' rights. So I think people will be happy to have split control.
All right, we've had a pretty collegial discussion here today on a rough election year, and we thank you both for coming.
Thank you very much for having us.
And coming next, some clips from Frankfort as the governor's office responds to Speaker Stumbo's naming of a committee to investigate him. Coming right up. Welcome back now to Kentucky Newsmakers from WKYT. I'm Bill Bryant. We have some of what was said this week when House Speaker Greg Stumbo announced a committee to investigate Governor Matt Bevin. And we hear from Bevin's chief of staff, who says the governor has done nothing wrong and that politics is driving Stumbo's move.
I wasn't at those meetings. I can't tell you what was said and what wasn't said, but this committee will have the power to find out exactly what it can and where the truth lies. Truth and transparency and open government is what the taxpayers of Kentucky expect and what they're entitled to. The cost, some might ask, we expect it to be low. The members will have the opportunity, obviously will be paid for their time and expenses, and I've authorized them, if they choose, to hire an independent counsel. Open meetings. The panel will decide that. But I want to make sure the process is transparent and accountable. The committee, as I said before, will have the power to subpoena witnesses, which I hope will not have to be used. And the process is very similar to the committee I formed in 2013 regarding charges against Representative John Arnold. By the way, Representative Simpson was a member of that committee. Some might ask, why not just file these charges with the Ethics Commission? Well, there's two reasons. One, we don't even know if they have a full-time investigator. And two, obviously, they are bound by appointment powers, which are controlled by the governor. So I don't think one can say they are truly an independent entity in this respect. We're not jumping to conclusions. We're not playing politics. We've been very diligent in researching the law and researching the facts. But again, I go back to the most troubling aspect of all of this, the fact that for some reason, $625,000 in taxpayers' money was paid for a contract which, from our investigation and our conversations with people who are knowledgeable about these matters, could have been fulfilled and gone forward with. And that does raise the issue of why it wasn't, and why wasn't the $200,000 paid to the landowner. If that is what the administration and the transportation cabinet says is the problem, why wasn't that just paid and the contract had gone forward? And obviously simple math tells you that a $400,000 savings would have occurred. The members have been briefed, with the exception of Representative Floyd. He does have some problems with his family and some health issues, I understand. But I don't think anyone questions the integrity of Representative Floyd. He's a former United States Air Force officer, and I would hope that he will be able to serve again. We're not asking them to find anything except the truth. We're asking them to review the facts. We're asking them to look at the documents. We're asking them to ask the tough questions as to why. But this conduct, there is enough evidence that we have gathered from our review to warrant such a committee and these actions going forward.
Very desperate people do very desperate things. Very, very, very desperate people pull stunts like Speaker Stumbo just did. Look at his record. This is a man who is accusing us of threatening people. I categorically deny that ever happened. But look at Speaker Stumbo's own record. In 2007, he told a union member that he would, quote, put a knife in his back because he did not support him in an election. When Governor Beshear won re-election in 2011, he pulled $50 million of road projects out of then Senate President David Williams' district. Where was the outrage there? Now, about 41 days ago, Speaker Stumbo started using this impeachment term. 39 days ago, he left a voicemail, which was 2 days ago on Monday, on State Representative David Floyd's cell phone. If you remember during the press conference, Speaker Stumbo said Representative Floyd had agreed to be part of this investigation. My understanding is that's not the case, but I want to play the voicemail for you right now. It's about a minute long, and then our office will send it to you. It's on my phone right here. I'm going to play this for you. And I want you to listen to it. It's 1 minute long.
Guess we're supposed to go to Alabama this last weekend, so we took her we'll stay for the ball game and sit beside one of your neighbors. But what I was calling that, David, I want to point you to one of the, I'm troubled about this whole idea that the governor may or may not have tried to coerce legislators. I don't know if he did or if he didn't. But because the legislators have been devastated, I think we at least ought to take a look at it and, see what happened. I'm sure the story's probably not as bad as maybe it was portrayed. But anyhow, I'd like for you to serve because you're not obviously coming back because you can't be coerced or threatened, and you're a man of integrity and honor, and I'll be making those appointments in probably this week, and it'd be an honor for you to call me if you'd like to, and just give me a shout, buddy. Thanks.
That's it. Now, again, our office will send you that actual clip. That was from 2 days ago, 39 days after Speaker Stumbo first called for impeachment. I'll highlight that here are the exact words from Speaker Stumbo. I don't know if he did or didn't. I'm sure the story's not as bad as it was portrayed. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a political farce, what is happening here. We are 34 days from an election. Speaker Stumbo, throughout his 40-year history, has been opposed to all types of transparency, whether it's pensions, because he has a $1.2 million taxpayer-funded pension. He's totally opposed to pension transparency. He did a charade a couple weeks ago.
Well, it's interesting, certainly, and the deadline to register and vote in Kentucky's general election is coming up this Tuesday, October 11th, and you can do that online by going to the Kentucky Secretary of State's website. Now, I'll be passing along election information and other news on my Twitter feed. Follow me at KY Newsmakers. We want to thank you for joining us for Kentucky Newsmakers. We'll see you bright and early this week on WKYT This Morning, and we certainly hope you make it a good week ahead.